Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Aces High. Today we're watching our next Roman series. Or the next video in our Roman series. So today's going to be Cicero's final hour, or finest hour. Basically, it's a Cicero heavy episode, and I guess it's probably going to be similar to the his years that we had earlier on. But we'll see. This is another Historia Civilis video. Seriously, love this series, love this channel. Go check them out if you haven't already. I do have the link in the description. If you're new to my channel, hit that sub button, hit that like button, and come join my Discord. There's a link in the description. I take video requests there, and it just helps me keep it more organized and helps me to see your guys' requests. Plus, I got a meme section, I got a music section. You guys can chat with each other, play games with each other, all that jazz. I'm trying to build it up. All right, well, I'm going to sit back. I'm going to shut up. Grab yourself a drink and let's get started, all right?
It took about 10 days for Octavius to learn of his great-uncle Caesar's death. In those 10 days, the world had changed. Caesar had been laid to rest in a fiery funeral. Riots had erupted on the streets of Rome, and the contents of Caesar's will had been revealed to the public. But
Okay.
Octavius didn't know any of this. All he knew was that Caesar was dead. Octavius was in Illyricum, overseeing preparations for Caesar's eastern campaigns. Those campaigns were probably off now, but what did that mean? The people around Octavius advised him to take up the nearby legions and avenge his great-uncle's death, but Octavius hesitated. He didn't know what the political situation was like back in Rome. If he started moving legions around, he ran the risk of being declared an enemy of the people by the Senate. Octavius decided to return to Rome as a private citizen. This was perhaps risky, but he didn't see a better option. Once he properly understood the political situation, he could decide what to do next. On the
Smart.
road to Rome, he began receiving a flood of letters. Caesar's will had been opened. Octavius was pretty much the last person to learn that he had been named Caesar's heir, giving him the rights to most of Caesar's Scrooge McDuck-sized fortune. As an expression of this passing of the torch, Caesar posthumously adopted Octavius as his son. When he got the news, we are told that Octavius broke down and cried.
I can't blame him. That's a lot.
Octavius's mother wrote him a letter advising him to return to Rome immediately, but to take the side roads, hide his identity, and be on the lookout for assassins. His stepfather separately advised him to renounce his adoption, take the money, and to retire from public life as a monstrously wealthy man. With a lot of conflicting advice coming his way, Octavius came up with his own plan. He would accept the adoption. From this moment forward, he would go by the name of Gaius Julius Caesar, the same as his adoptive father. This is hella confusing, and so historians have, over the years, decided to assign this new Caesar with the name Octavianus, or Octavian for short, which is just the past tense version of the name Octavius. But it's important to
Okay.
remember that this is solely a convention among historians, and that, as far as his contemporaries were concerned, he was a second Caesar. When Octavian landed in Italy, he appeared in public under his new name. The crowds hailed him as his father's son. The Senate and the people were put on notice. The heir to Caesar was returning to Rome. Back in the capital, things were moving quickly. Antony and Lepidus had already pressured many of Caesar's assassins into leaving the city, which was good for them, but now they needed to look inward. If the Caesarian faction was to survive, the Antony-Lepidus alliance had to remain strong. As a first step, Antony's daughter was engaged to marry Lepidus's son, both of whom were children. This was a good start, but it was all symbolic. What else could they do? There was the matter of the Pontifex Maximus. The position of Rome's chief priest was a lifetime appointment, previously held by Caesar. But here's the thing. Sometime within the last year or so, the Senate passed some minor piece of legislation that said that Caesar's son would succeed him as Pontifex Maximus, Octavian. This was a problem. Antony did some quick thinking and argued that since Octavian hadn't physically come to Rome and made his adoption official yet, legally speaking, Caesar had no son, at least for the next few days. Antony
Hmm.
hastily called an election and made sure that his partner Lepidus took Caesar's place as Pontifex Maximus. The fact that it was Lepidus and not Antony offers us an insight that maybe Antony considered himself a junior partner in this alliance.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The riots and the killing and the political uncertainty had everybody on edge. Violent mobs were sometimes known to target specific politicians or threaten to burn down the entire city. There were already whispers of another civil war. Shops closed, foot traffic dried up, and a vast number of Romans went into hiding. The senator Cicero observed that, quote, even the mice are leaving. Many of Cicero's political allies had already fled the city and urged him to do the same. Cicero agonized over this decision, seeking advice from many of his friends abroad. In the end, he decided to stay in Rome and put his own life at risk so that he could fight in the Senate to avert another civil war. Friendly neighborhood historian Tom Holland calls this the most courageous decision of his life. By April, Octavian arrived in Rome. The Antony-Lepidus alliance had a legitimate claim to the leadership of the Caesarian faction, but so did Octavian.
Okay.
They immediately began butting heads. Cicero writes that Antony started producing old decrees from Caesar that happened to back up whatever he was pushing at the moment. Cicero suspected that they were all forgeries, but he couldn't prove it. He also noticed that Antony was really dragging his feet when it came to handing over Caesar's fortune. It was Octavian's job, as Caesar's primary heir, to fulfill the terms of Caesar's will, which included the approximately 3 months' wages promised to every adult male Roman citizen. So long as Antony controlled Caesar's money, Octavian couldn't do this. So instead, he ignored Antony. He made the rounds to many of Caesar's old allies, asking for favors and taking out personal loans. He couldn't raise the total amount this way, but he raised enough to get the ball rolling. People began receiving their money. But the most important
Okay,
aspect of
that's
this
smart.
is that he let the public know that he was putting his own credibility on the line so that he could fulfill Caesar's commitment to the people. This made him wildly popular, virtually overnight. If Antony's goal in dragging his feet was to damage Octavian's reputation, his plan backfired badly. He would eventually release Caesar's fortune, making Octavian one of the richest people on Earth. By the summer of the year 44, Roman politics had completely realigned. Antony was still technically running things as consul, but Cicero was now the leader of a vocal anti-Antonian faction in the Senate. As Antony attempted to
Okay.
assert his dominance, Cicero fought him tooth and nail. The big debate over the summer was over what to do with the province of Cisalpine Gaul. Next year, Antony was due to take over as the governor of Macedonia. This was a great province. It came with 6 legions attached to it, but it wasn't the best province. The best province, given Rome's recent history, was Cisalpine Gaul. It came with a couple legions, a vibrant tax base, and most importantly, it was close to Rome. The threat of crossing the Rubicon was everything now. Whoever was the governor of Cisalpine Gaul had the opportunity to dominate Roman politics from a distance. But here's the thing. Decimus, one of Caesar's assassins, was going to be the governor of Cisalpine Gaul. In fact, he'd been handpicked for this job by Caesar shortly before his death. But Antony didn't care about that. He wanted Decimus gone. He wanted that province. He proposed a swap in the Senate, Macedonia for Cisalpine Gaul. But he had some conditions. First, Antony wanted to bring over the 6 legions from Macedonia and keep the 2 in Cisalpine Gaul, giving him a massive army. Second, he wanted his brother Gaius Antonius to take his place as the governor of Macedonia, leaving Decimus with just his toga in his hands. It's pretty clear
How's
what was
that a
going on
swap?
here. It's exactly the kind of thing that Cicero feared. Antony wanted to be another Caesar, another civil war. Cicero fought this request in the Senate, but people were exhausted, and nobody was prepared to go nuclear over a request to transfer provinces. He lost. The Senate sided with Antony.
Wow.
But Decimus didn't take this lying down. He said that Caesar had personally hand-picked him as governor, and he seemed to remember the Senate passing a resolution saying that all of Caesar's legislation and appointments were locked in place. Was Antony interested in tearing up that agreement? Because that would open a whole can of worms. As an act of defiance, Decimus took his legions and marched on some Gallic tribes in the Alps, winning a minor victory. The legions hailed him as imperator. He wrote to Cicero, asking if there was enough support in the Senate to get him a triumph for his victory. Some people just don't have an instinct for politics because there definitely wasn't. The Senate had just voted to take away his province, but Cicero told a polite lie and said he'd look into it. So the Senate under Antony had voted to take away Decimus's province. Decimus responded by saying that they didn't have that authority. Things were at a bit of a standoff.
Okay.
In June, all of the major anti-Antonians got together in central Italy for a big important meeting. The following people were in attendance: Cicero, Brutus, Brutus's wife Portia, Brutus's mother Servilia, Cassius, Cassius's wife Tertulla, and a conservative senator named Favonius. Decimus would have been invited, but he was obviously busy. Cassius and his wife Tertulla were running late, so the meeting got started without them. Together, they considered an offer from the Senate that would put Brutus and Cassius in charge of grain collection in the provinces of Sicily and Asia Minor. This was basically a way to give Brutus and Cassius an excuse to stay away from Rome for the next couple years.
Okay.
Cicero
Smart.
told Brutus that they should take the offer. If they were going to continue avoiding Rome, they might as well make themselves useful. He could hold things down in the Senate. Brutus was indecisive. He told Cicero that it was always his plan to return to Rome as soon as possible. Cicero responded by saying that it was not safe for Caesar's assassins to show their faces in the city. He told Brutus that his survival was paramount, since he, as the leader of the assassins, was the Republic's only defense against tyranny. This was blatant flattery, and who knows if Cicero even meant a word of it, but it seemed to be effective on Brutus. Cassius and his wife then rolled in there like a couple of tornadoes. Cassius got right to the point. Supervising grain collection is a slap in the face. He then launched into a litany of all of their squandered opportunities since the assassination, and in particular, he criticized Decimus for not being aggressive enough in Cisalpine Gaul. Cassius informed the group that he would be turning down the grain collection job. Instead,
Before he gets into what his job was, wow, what the hell? I don't know why it like shrunk down halfway. Anyway, before he gets into what his job was or is gonna be or what he wants, he one thing that popped up right there that I'm sure he brought up is you didn't want to kill Antony, and that's a good point. They didn't kill Antony when they had the chance, and that would have made a hell of a lot of difference, I think.
he would be heading to the province of Syria, where he was supposed to take over as governor next year. If the Senate wanted to take his province away, let him try. Brutus was like, fine. If Cassius was doing that, he would head to Asia Minor to help out another prominent conspirator, Trebonius. Brutus's mother Servilia spoke up and said that if that was their decision, she would persuade some friendly senators to get the offer rescinded. With their decision made, Cassius continued to hammer away at the absent Decimus for letting Antony get the better of him. Cicero tried to calm things down, telling everybody that it was useless to dwell on the past. He then began to, with no self-awareness, point fingers at everybody else in the room, asking each of them why they were not more decisive in the days following the Ides of March. Why on earth did they barricade themselves on the Capitoline Hill and hand the initiative to Antony? What was the purpose of that? Servilia cut him off and shut down the debate. Nobody was really happy, but at least now they had a plan. Cicero would continue to work the Senate in Rome. Brutus would head to Asia Minor, and Cassius would head to Syria. From these powerful positions, they would have the strength to support Decimus against Antony. In the days following the meeting, Cicero privately railed against his allies for being completely useless ever since the Ides of March. He wrote in one letter that, quote, "In good truth, I found a ship with timbers all gone to pieces. No plan, no system, no method.
Jesus.
By the autumn of 44 BCE, Cicero had switched to a much more aggressive posture. He made a series of speeches and distributed a series of pamphlets that directly denounced Antony as a tyrant. These are known as the Philippics, and they survive to this day. Another one of Cicero's political innovations was that he began to publicly praise Octavian. If he could split the Caesarian faction between Antony and Octavian, he might be able to oust Antony in a moment of weakness. Octavian welcomed the support of Cicero and used the opportunity to ramp up his own criticism of Antony. Over this period, Cicero and Octavian got really close. Octavian began calling the older man father as a sign of respect. The opportunity to split the Caesarian faction came sooner than anybody expected. In October of 44, when Antony left Rome to inspect some legions, Octavian used his newfound wealth to raise a private army and march on Rome. It wasn't a very big army, only 3,000 retired soldiers, but it was enough to occupy the city. And just like that, a civil war had begun. It was incredibly sudden and strange. Nobody had bothered to make any official declarations or anything, it just happened. Antony approached from the south with those legions he was inspecting, 6 in total, 30,000 soldiers if they were at full strength. By November, Octavian had abandoned Rome and fled north, and Antony had reoccupied the capital. But Octavian quickly learned that 2 of those 6 legions under Antony were unhappy to be marching against the son of Caesar. At their first opportunity, they abandoned Antony and came over to Octavian's side.
Really?
Antony's first instinct was to have Octavian declared an enemy of the people, but with several of his legions defecting and Cicero leading a vocal anti-Antonian faction in the Senate, he wasn't sure if such a thing would pass. Both sides now appealed to Decimus for support. With his 2 legions, he could easily tip the balance in either direction. But there was never any doubt. Decimus sided with Octavian. Cicero ramped up his attacks in the Senate. All of the pieces were falling into place. But Antony surprised everybody. He marched north, around Octavian's legions, and headed straight for Decimus in Cisalpine Gaul. Antony's legions outnumbered Decimus's by 2-1, but honestly half of those under Decimus were straight up rookies, so really it was more like 4-1. Cicero urgently wrote to Brutus, who was currently in Greece, urging him to bring all available legions to Decimus's aid. Brutus was kind of baffled by this. Had they all lost their minds? Had they really thrown in their lot with the son of Caesar? If the Caesarian faction was fighting amongst themselves, that was good. Just sit back and wait for the dust to settle. What were they thinking? Brutus was horribly out of touch with how quickly things were changing in Rome. Whether he meant it or not, he had just stabbed Decimus in the back. In Cisalpine Gaul, Antony demanded Decimus's surrender. Decimus refused. Within a matter of days, Cicero worked his magic in the Senate and passed 2 pivotal pieces of legislation. First, he got Octavian appointed pro-praetor, which meant that he had the right to command an army while still being accountable to the consuls. It legitimized his illegal actions up to this point. Second, all governors, including Decimus, were to keep their current provinces for the foreseeable future. Anybody trying to take away anybody else's province, for any reason, would be in violation of the law. Cicero and the Senate sent a stern letter to Antony, instructing him to stand down. He refused. At the beginning of the new year, Antony's term as consul expired, and 2 new consuls took office, former Caesarians, who were now loyal to Cicero. The 2 new consuls took command of 4 legions, and joined up with Octavian in central Italy. Together, they all marched north to Decimus's aid. Cicero instructed one of the consuls to assume overall command, and the other to split off and raise additional legions. The consuls followed Cicero's orders, which tells you a lot. Decimus didn't mess around, and quickly moved to occupy the city of Mutina. He mobilized the entire population in preparation for a siege, and before too long, he had several years of food in storage, and was training a new legion made up of locals. This was a smart, strategic move. Antony was way out on a limb, and Decimus had Cicero and the Senate on his side.
It's just crazy that he was able to raise several years worth of food so quick.
All he had to do was drag things out until friendly legions arrived. Antony must have finally realized that he was in a sticky situation because his next move was to send a peace offer to Cicero. He would withdraw from Cisalpine Gaul, he said, if the Senate would agree to grant him the province of Transalpine Gaul, which was all the territory north of here, basically all of Caesar's conquests from the Gallic Wars. Obviously, Cicero said no. The 1-year anniversary of Caesar's assassination came and went with very little fanfare.
I'm actually surprised that people didn't bring up some type of celebration or something like that on the 1 year anniversary of Caesar's death, you know? It just doesn't make much sense.
In April, Octavian and one of the consuls arrived in Cisalpine Gaul. They outnumbered Antony 7 legions to 4, but since many of their legions were new and inexperienced, and Antony's were not, they judged that the two sides were basically equally matched. They decided to wait for the other consul to show up with 4 additional legions. But Antony surprised everybody for a second time. He abandoned the siege of Mutina and marched south, back around Octavian and the one consul, and set up between the two armies. Antony set an
Really?
ambush and tricked the consul to the south into attacking through some wetlands. The fighting was exhausting, but by the end of the day, Antony's legions had stormed the enemy camp. The consul was killed in the fighting. Octavian and the other consul sent help, but they arrived too late. There was another minor clash, but Antony and his exhausted legions withdrew back to the north. Octavian and the only remaining consul decided not to delay any longer. They marched to relieve the siege of Mutina. Antony's exhausted legions put up a fight, but when Decimus opened the city gates and attacked from the other direction, he was forced to retreat. This
Okay.
battle happened on Decimus's birthday, which is not important, but it is funny.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Speaking of our collective unceasing march toward death, that other consul died during the battle. That means that both Roman consuls had died in battle, something that had not happened in 2 centuries, not since the Punic Wars.
Okay.
With news of the victory, Cicero had the Senate name Antony an enemy of the people. Can we just pause for a moment to appreciate what Cicero had accomplished here? A year ago, it looked like Antony was about to become a second Caesar. Instead, Cicero implemented a political strategy that split the Caesarian faction and ended with Antony being declared an enemy of the Republic. What an achievement! Antony retreated north across the Alps and joined up with Lepidus. Decimus followed close behind. Meanwhile, Brutus was in Greece. Through diplomacy, he had used this time to gather the support of all of the provincial governors from Illyricum to Syria. This was all highly illegal,
Okay.
of course, but Cicero eventually secured for him an actual command, which gave the whole thing some legitimacy. Through this process, Brutus captured Antony's brother, Gaius Antonius. Cassius was still in Syria, in command of 8 legions. Some clever thinking allowed him to intercept a Roman army headed from Egypt to Italy, bringing his total up to 12 legions. Cassius pressed Brutus to go on the
Yeah, but that last legion, are they really going to be that loyal, or are they going to defect at the first chance they get?
attack, but Brutus remained cautious. He argued that since they had broad support across the empire, there was no need to force one decisive battle. Much better to just let the Caesarians bleed each other dry. I do my best to be generous to these historical figures who were acting with imperfect information, but I will point out that during this crisis, Brutus's first instinct always seemed to be do nothing. That's an alarming trait.
Okay,
I
yeah,
wonder how
true.
different things would have been if Cassius had been the one put in charge. By the summer of 43, Octavian began to complain to Cicero about the empty consulships. He said that it was impossible to prosecute a war without leadership at the top. He said that, wait for it, he should be named a replacement consul. It's not actually clear that this was necessary at all. Elections were already ramping up for next year, the Senate was functioning properly, the armies in the field were winning. What was the big emergency? Cicero and the Senate denied Octavian's request. And then, just like that, Octavian marched on Rome. again.
Jesus.
Things are getting pretty wacky, so let's take a second to recap. Decimus was attacking Antony. Cicero and the Senate were supporting Decimus and attacking Antony. Brutus and Cassius were supposed to be attacking Antony, but since they distrusted Octavian, they were keeping their powder dry. Octavian had been attacking Antony, but now he was attacking Cicero and the Senate. It was starting to look like a five-sided civil war. Cicero and the Senate called upon 4 legions in North Africa to defend the capital, but all 4 went over to the son of Caesar.
I believe it.
Octavian sent some centurions into the city of Rome to negotiate. According to one account, maybe embellishing a bit for dramatic effect, the lead centurion approached a group of senators, rested his hand on the hilt of his sword, and said, "If the Senate does not make Octavian a consul, this will." The Senate called special elections, but everybody knew the results in advance. Octavian and one of his cousins were elected consuls, and took office immediately. One of Octavian's first acts was to condemn Caesar's assassins, officially ending the grand compromise that was set up immediately after Caesar's assassination. If you remember, the assassins were granted amnesty in exchange for ratification of Caesar's political acts.
Yeah, it's the problem is if you prosecute them now, what happens to Caesar's legislation in the future? Does some of it get overturned, things like that? But I also agree that they should be prosecuted.
That was all over now. Octavian had altered the deal. Cicero was distraught. He bitterly wrote to Decimus, telling him that, quote, "The Senate was my weapon, and it has fallen to pieces in my hand." He also wrote to Brutus in Greece, telling him to get to Rome as soon as humanly possible. Incredibly, Brutus refused. He seemed to believe that he and Cicero were having some minor disagreement over tactics. He was mistaken. What Cicero was actually saying was that he had lost the war. His attempt to split the Caesarian faction had failed.
Hmm.
In defeat, Cicero left the city in Octavian's hands and retired to the Italian countryside. As consul, Octavian opened up negotiations with Antony. In doing so, he stabbed Cicero, Decimus, Cassius, Brutus, and the entire Roman Senate in the back. Antony and Lepidus spent all summer recruiting soldiers, and by the autumn, they re-entered Cisalpine Gaul with 18 legions. Decimus had no choice but to pull back. On his difficult trek back through the Alps, most of his army deserted him. His initial plan was to head east and join forces with Brutus and Cassius, but without an army, there was very little point in doing that. Instead, he decided to head north. Decimus had spent the better part of a decade campaigning with Caesar in Gaul. He had plenty of allies up there, he was fluent in the language, perhaps he could pull some strings and raise an army. But apparently when Decimus reached the Rhine River, everybody, including his bodyguards, abandoned him. Without protection, it wasn't safe for Decimus to be in Gaul, and so he changed plans once more, disguised himself as a local, and started making his way east to Brutus. But Decimus's string of bad luck would not end. While going through a totally routine checkpoint in Cisalpine Gaul, a Roman soldier recognized his face. Decimus was captured, and Antony demanded his head. Within a few days, he got it.
Wow. I guess there goes Decimus.
Late in the year, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus met near the border of Cisalpine Gaul and Italy to negotiate a deal. This deal would become known to historians as the Second Triumvirate. Unlike the first triumvirate between Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, this was official, backed up with the full force of law. All 3 triumvirs would be awarded dictatorial power for 5 years. In addition to this, each would be responsible for governing a portion of the western half of Rome's empire. Remember, Brutus and Cassius still controlled the east. Antony would control Gaul, which is exactly what he had wanted since the beginning. Lepidus would control Spain. Octavian would control North Africa and the Mediterranean islands like Sicily and Sardinia. You can
Okay.
tell from this agreement that Octavian was the junior partner here.
Yeah.
The triumvirate also gave the three the ability to make law without consulting the Senate or the people of Rome. This is, frankly, what Cicero had feared all along: unchecked authoritarian power, a Roman monarchy with three heads.
Okay.
Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian then ordered a purge of Rome's political class. The Romans called these proscriptions. This was not without precedent. The dictator Sulla had ordered large proscriptions 40 years earlier, but this was regarded as a traumatic event, not only to Rome's political class, but to Caesar personally, who was careful to avoid doing the same thing when he came to power. But Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian were young and had no memory of Sulla's purge. They didn't care. Their enemies had to go.
Wow.
The way proscriptions worked is that every day a list would be posted in a public place with the names of those that had been proscribed. Anybody on the list was instantly stripped of their citizenship and was no longer under the protection of Roman law. Any citizen who ratted out or murdered a proscribed person was entitled to seize a portion of their wealth, with the rest going to the state. The proscriptions were truly a repugnant practice. They turned a whole generation
Jesus.
of murderers into millionaires. Of course, many fled as soon as their names appeared on the proscription lists, but the promise of wealth completely destroyed friendships and tore families apart. It was horrible. As much as a third of the Roman Senate was proscribed, as well as thousands of other rich citizens. In fact, the historian Appian writes that some were proscribed simply because they were rich. That's bad, I think. No, yeah, that's bad. Murder's bad. We're anti-murder in this house. There was an ongoing negotiation between Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian as to who would appear on the proscription lists. In the end, they were all forced to compromise and give up people who they would have preferred to save. Antony gave up his uncle. Lepidus gave up his brother. Octavian gave up Cicero, the man that he had once called father. Antony
Okay.
was the one who insisted.
That's rough.
On December 7th, 43 BCE, a small group, led by a military tribune and a centurion, showed up at Cicero's villa. The doors were locked, but they busted in. After interrogating some workers, they learned that Cicero was on his way to the sea. They caught up with him on the road. He knew that he was caught. He told his entourage to stop. They found him in a reclined position, reading. He spoke to his killers. "I am stopping here." He turned to the lead centurion. "Come here, soldier. There's nothing proper about what you're doing, but at least make sure you cut off my head properly." Cicero stuck out his neck and indicated what he wanted done. The centurion slit his throat.
Jesus.
The group of killers then cut the head and the hands off of Cicero's body and sent them to Antony as proof. Antony nailed Cicero's hands to the speaking platform outside the Senate House, the same hands that wrote all those pamphlets opposing him 1 year ago. It is so upsetting
Oh
that
my
Cicero
God.
went out this way. He deserved better. Historian Anthony Everett calls him the greatest statesman in Roman history. I love Cicero. I'm in that camp too.
Jesus.
Years later, when Octavian was an old man, he caught his grandson reading something that Cicero had written. His grandson had some vague notion that this was some old enemy of his grandfather's, and so in a panic, he tried to hide the writing under his clothes. Octavian saw what he was trying to do and had him hand it over. For a long time, he stood there, reading the words of Cicero, written in another era. In time, he handed the writing back to his grandson, saying, "My child, this was a learned man and a lover of his country."
uh, yeah. Yeah, so I guess I did miss that episode, and I'm glad I went back and watched it. I wish I would have watched it before the Battle of Philippi, whatever. Freaking forgot how to say it. Um, but I mean, Cicero wasn't perfect. There were a lot of problems with him for sure. But I'm with Historia Civilis on this. I'm on Team Cicero, and that's a very unfortunate way to go out. It really is. And I'm sure that having to make that choice kind of beat up Octavian a little bit. But I wasn't there. I don't know for sure. Anyway, hope you guys dug it. Till next time, this is Ace I love y'all, and I'm out.